to look at absolute value. Absolute value can be described as the distance from 0, or a number's distance from 0. Oops. So the distance of a number from 0. And distance is always positive. So let's do an example. The absolute value of -5 is 5. -5 is 5 away from 0. If you think about a number line, and this is -5, here's -4, -3, -2, -1, and 0, you can see that it's 5 away from 0. -0.2 is 0.2 away from 0, so we see the absolute value of -0.2 is 0.2. The absolute value of 4 is 4. 4 is 4 away from 0, and the absolute value of 20 is 20. 20 is 20 away from 0. So absolute value is the distance from 0. If it's negative, it turns into a positive number, and if it's positive, it stays positive. So let's do some examples. Sean throws his computer into the lake. A few minutes later, Caden throws a cell phone into the same lake. At one point, Sean's computer is 5 feet below the surface. At the same time, Caden's phone is 3 feet below the surface. It says, write a numerical statement representing Sean and Caden's devices' distances. So we have Sean's cell phone is 3 feet, actually this is 5 feet below the surface. And Caden, his cell phone is 3 feet below the surface. And it says, fill in the following correct inequality, -3 and -5. When we know -3 is actually bigger than -5, but if we take a look at it, Caden's cell phone has traveled not as far. So again, here's 3 feet below the surface, and here's 5 feet below the surface. So it says, whose has really traveled further? Well, it's this laptop that's traveled further, even though we don't know that -3 is bigger or is smaller than -5. Or -3 is bigger than -5. -5 is smaller. And so we need absolute value to kind of show us that -5 is a bigger distance than -3. So it says we use absolute value to represent distances for this reason, because again, if we have a -3 and a -5, -3 is bigger, but we want to show that the 5 has traveled further. So we would write something like this. 3 is less than 5. So we look at the absolute value. All right, let's look at number 2. Mrs. Bajan decided to start a swear jar in an effort to improve her students' characters. Students were asked to add 50 cents to the jar if they were heard cussing. One day, Kyrie owed Mrs. Bajan $1.50, and Skylar owed Miss Bajan $2. Write a numerical statement representing these amounts. So Kyrie was down $1.50, so he was out $1.50. And Skylar, she was out $2. And if we look at this inequality, we know that on a number line, so if this was a number line right here, here would be -2, here would be -1.5, -1.5, and here would be 0. And so we know on a number line that -150 is bigger than -$2, but who really owed more? And it was, this was Kyrie and Skylar. We know that Skylar really owed more. So this is where we have to use absolute value, because we know that Kyrie owed $1.50 and Skylar owed $2. And we want something to show that Skylar owes more. And so we say 2 is more than $1.50. So again, solving with absolute value, if it's negative, you make it positive. So the absolute value of -5 is 5. Now you're going to see some equations that look like this. The absolute value of what number is 5? What number is 5 away from 5? Well, we know that what number is 5 away from 0? Well, we know 5 is 5 away from 0, but there's another answer. -5 is also 5 away from 0, just from this problem right here. So we know that the absolute value of -5 is 5. Let's take a look at this. What number is 8 away from 0? Well, that would be 8. and that would also be negative 8. So when we get something like this absolute value, we can split this into two numbers. X can be 8, X can be negative 8. Likewise, we can do that. This is saying, all right, X plus 2, if you add that together, that can be 8 inside of here. But also, X plus 2, this whole thing inside here, can be negative 8. Because if we take the absolute value of negative 8, that will also get us 8. So we're going to split it into two equations, and we're going to solve each equation. So to get rid of the plus 2, we're going to subtract 2 from each side. And X will be 6, but also X will be negative 10. And you can check your answer by plugging in and making sure both sides are equal. So negative 10 plus 2, what is equal? Negative 8. The absolute value of negative 8 is 8. Let's plug in a 6. 6 plus 2 is 8. The absolute value of 8 is 8. Let's take a look at E and F. All right, so in E right here, X minus 4 is a number. And that number can be 8. So X minus 4 can be 8. Try that again. And X minus 4 can be negative 8. Because again, inside this absolute value, you can get the two different answers. We're going to solve, so we'll add 4 to each side. So one of our answers can be 12. And the other answer can be negative 8 plus 4 is negative 4. And if you plug both of these answers in, you get an 8 on each side. Let's try another one. This number, 2x minus 6, whatever this is, can equal 8. So we have 2x minus 6 can be 8. But also 2x minus 6 can be negative 8, so you're going to split it up. And we'll solve each side. So we're going to add 6 to each side. Should have been a minus. Should have been an equals. All right, so we got 2x equals 14. Divide by 2. So x will be 7 is one answer up here. The other answer, we're going to add 6 to each side. Oh, this should have been a negative 8. Let's rewrite this. I think that's what I meant to do. All right, so 2x minus 6 equals negative 8. We're going to add 6 to each side. We'll get 2x equals negative 2. Divide each side by 2. So x can be two answers, either 7 or x can be negative 1. And if you plug in your answer, we should be able to get 8 on each side. So 2 times 7 is 14. 14 minus 8 is, or 14 minus 6 is 8. 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. Negative 2 minus 6 is also positive 8 when we look at the absolute value. Now, let's take a look at C and D. C and D are different than all the other ones because they have numbers on the outside. So when you solve one like this, think of the absolute value like parentheses, and we would solve in that same order. So you want to get rid of everything outside the absolute value first and then split it up. So here you have the absolute value of x divided by 2 equals 8. Get rid of the divided by 2 first, and we'll get rid of that by multiplying each side by 2. These 2's cancel. You get the absolute value of x equals 16. Now split it up. So you can have x equals 16 and x can equal negative 16. And here are your two answers. You can plug in and check. 16 divided by 2 is 8. The absolute value of negative 16 by 2 divided by 2 is also 8. Let's take a look at this one again. Let's get rid of this 2. It's being multiplied, so we're going to divide this one. We have the absolute value of x plus 1 equals 4. We're going to split it up now because we have the absolute value by itself. We have x plus 1 equals 4. And x plus 1 equals negative 4. We'll solve. We'll subtract 1 from each side. So one of our answers will be 3, and one of our answers will be negative 5. You can plug it in and make sure that they work. So remember, when you solve an absolute value, split it up into the positive and negative, but get rid of any number on the outside first before you split up the equation to plus and minus. So we'll practice this more tomorrow, but in class you're going to be looking at these types of problems.